My name is Geoff Johansing, and I'm here with Cindy Flynn, who I've known for quite a while and done many of these webinars with. We're here today to talk to you about the mandate and how it impacts employers, specifically with regards to vaccinating and not vaccinating your employees and the other types of constraints you might have. My name is Geoff Johansing. I am a property and casualty insurance agent. I work with IOA Insurance Services. I'm in Pasadena, and I'd like to introduce you to Cindy Flynn.
Hi, everyone. Cindy Flynn. I run Hackler Flynn and Associates, an employment defense law firm, and we too are located in Pasadena. But before we get started, I do have a disclaimer for you, since I am an attorney, that content on this webinar should not be considered legal advice. It's for informational purposes only. Communications made through this webinar and or by participating in it do not create an attorney-client relationship, although of course our firm is always happy to do so outside of this webinar. And we're not responsible for any content that you may access from third-party resources. So Geoff and I thought we'd do just kind of a quick update on some key highlights that have happened over the last, well, really few months, but some have come down as recent as yesterday and some have gone into effect today. So, with the COVID-19 vaccination becoming available, it's been hopefully a huge relief for a lot of us in our country, right? It's just hopefully a sign moving toward the end of the pandemic, but with the new variant, we will see a lot will be revealed in 2022. So I wanted to go over just a couple recent updates. I think most of you know by this point, there are 3 vaccines available in the US. The Pfizer vaccine has final FDA approval. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson still are under the emergency use authorization from the FDA, but Moderna has already requested final approval, and then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is supposed to apply for final approval relatively shortly. I was last told before the end of the year, although it's getting pretty close. So with the vaccine mandate, really millions of Americans will soon be required to get vaccinated under the new Biden administration mandate, right? So there's workers covered by federal vaccine mandate fall into either federal employees, including military, employees of companies with government contracts, and then healthcare workers at facilities that run Medicare and Medicaid. If you fall under any of those, I'd be happy to go over the more specifics, but this is just kind of a high level overview of what's currently going on. And just a note here that the mandate permits medical and religious exemptions, but generally do not allow regular testing and masking in lieu of vaccination. And then there's the OSHA order, and that is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, of course. And that is an emergency order that affects employees at companies with 100 or more workers not covered by the other federal mandates. And that was implemented, and then this order does allow for testing and masking. Now, as recent as last month, a federal appeals court on November 12th ordered OSHA to stop taking further steps to implement or enforce the mandate on private employers, saying that it grossly exceeds OSHA's statutory authority. The agency relied on little used emergency powers to issue the rules, and the deadline was originally January 4th of 2022. Now it's in limbo as a result of this federal court's ruling. And I will say this, a lot of times, assuming this goes smoothly and is passed, which is yet to be seen, of course, but then it's usually companies with 50 or more employees, and then it's companies with 5 or more employees. So that's the trend we've seen over the last few years of how they get to basically affect smaller and smaller businesses. So even though you're saying like, hey, I don't have over 100 employees in my company today, it may linger next year if this is still an ongoing issue. Just a side note and my personal opinion. But okay, getting back to what the OSHA order says, Biden officials have said that all other requirements under the OSHA rule take effect December 5th, And that includes providing paid time off for employees to get vaccinated and masking for unvaccinated workers. And this is important to know, as entities with 100 or more workers under the OSHA rules can be fined $13,000 plus for each violation and 10 times that for any willful violation. So while these mandates will have a sweeping effect on larger employers in our country, the reality is, particularly while the OSHA order is in limbo, many employers are still left to decide on how to proceed with vaccine mandates within your own company. And then just 2 more notes on recent updates. A person who experiences ongoing but intermittent headaches or brain fog stemming from COVID-19 may have a disability protected by federal law. The EEOC came out yesterday and said that, yesterday, Tuesday, December 14th. So in that guidance, it's broadly outlined on how the virus is affecting employees, and that it falls within the scope of the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. And then,
Cindy,
yes.
Is that what's considered long COVID that you just described?
Long COVID?
Yeah, the COVID that extends for quite a while.
Oh, it sounds like it. Yeah, it's like ongoing but intermittent is how it's being described from the EEOC. And then just one more note. Also, there was a very recent update that starts today, December 15th, about the indoor mask mandate. And just be mindful that the state just implemented this mandate. So if you're outside of California, you know, that's a whole nother world. But and an indoor mask mandate beginning today, December 15th, and extending for 1 month. So regardless of vaccination status, employees must wear masks indoors. And then, of course, there's this whole question with what's right for your business and your company. You know, do you want to mandate or do you want to recommend the vaccine? There's been a recent spread of the I always get this mixed up, Omicron variant. And so to answer that question, you really need to look at some of the EEOC guidance and their general views, which, you know, we don't have time to get into the specifics today, but there's a lot of FAQs and instructions on that. But the bottom line is, if you want to, you can implement mandatory vaccine requirements. Of course, the question is always, well, what if somebody says that they have a sincerely held religious belief or a disability and therefore cannot get vaccinated? And then you have to go through all the steps related to that. So if you have questions on that, it can get very specific per client, but that's just in general what is going on today. Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
So if any of you have questions during this presentation, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them as they come up. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address the workplace safety and then also workers' compensation. And I know employers are going through quite a bit right now. We've got labor shortages, we've got high gas prices, we've got slow supplies getting to us, if they even get to us, and just trying to be a resource to help employers deal with other stuff such as this. With regards to workplace safety, there is what's required for each employer is to have a written COVID-19 prevention program. And in that program, you identify the areas that you as an employer are going to address, training, and that sort of stuff for your workplace. Personal protection equipment that you're providing your employees, those employees that want to wear masks, regardless of vaccination status, should be able to get them from the employer. And the employer needs to provide masks for employees who have not been vaccinated and require that they use them. The only reason that they're not required to use them is if it's a safety issue with regards to their job and where the mask could impede or create some kind of unsafe environment. And then also while you're eating. So those are the two reasons that you don't wear them during work. And again, any employee can request a mask regardless of their vaccination status, and it needs to be supplied by the employer. And then you can also require your employees wear gloves and eye protection stuff in the event that there's airborne opportunities or likelihood. I was at the dentist. There's a huge opportunity for the people at those facilities to get airborne illness from that. And then as an employer, you also want to do your best to pull in as much outside air into your facility as possible. And I know right now, today, it's super cold and it's not likely, but in the opportunity that, or the event that you can, bring in as much outside air into your facility as possible. And then it's very wise to implement cleaning protocol that include the commonly touched surfaces. So those are the doorknobs, the kitchen counters, the bathroom surfaces. A lot of my clients are in the manufacturing space, so hand tools that they use and share amongst the employees. And you know, there's a very good and detailed synopsis of this stuff on the Department of Industrial Relations website. And then with regards to workers' compensation, so COVID claims are to be reported to your insurance carrier, and the employees are entitled to workers' compensation benefits. And these benefits are if they have contracted COVID at the workplace. The employer does have an opportunity to rebut the presumption that they got sick at the workplace. And also those employees that are telecommuting or working from home are not entitled to the workers' compensation COVID claim because they're working at home, so they didn't get it in the workplace. And then for these employees, the benefits that they're entitled are time off. And the first bucket of time you take is their sick time. So you're able to apply that as the employer, you're pulling that up. And what that does is it reduces the work comp claim. So in the long run, in the short term, it may seem like it's costing you more money, but in the long term, it's not, because your claims are coming down, and work comp claims do wind up costing the employer more than what the carrier pays out. And then, so you can find, again, a lot more information on the dir.ca.gov website. And that's it. Cindy, I'll turn it on over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Geoff. So just to kind of, you know, think about incentives and employee relations within your business, this implicates intangible employee morale and employee relations issues that I think are worth mentioning as a consideration so that you can decide how to proceed in a way that's best for your business. And what I found was interesting was that there's been surveys of employees that have stated that the overwhelming majority of employees would actually be much less likely to want to vaccinate if the vaccine were mandated by the employer. So you can use the carrot or the stick. However, for some employees, incentives may be effective to really change that opinion. And what's interesting is today is my 101st presentation this year on all of Zoom webinars this year. I've done 101 webinars, and I always ask polling questions, not always, but a lot of times I do. And in the response that I get back from most people in the little surveys I do and the polls that I've taken this year on whether or not employees are more likely to get vaccinated if it's mandated by their employer, they've all said, yes, I am. If I'm forced to, I will get vaccinated. But that goes in the opposite direction of what the surveys say that we've researched online. So I don't know, I thought that was worth mentioning. And then the updated EEOC guidance makes it clear that you as the employer may offer rewards and incentives for employees to become vaccinated. And if the vaccination is voluntarily received by the employer from a non-employer healthcare provider, such as the local pharmacy that's down the street and the employer doesn't have a relationship with them, then there's no limit or cap on the incentive that may be offered. If employers offer incentives for vaccination by the employer or its agents, so that they have somebody come onto the grounds and gets everybody their vaccine, it states that the incentives may not be so substantial as to be coercive because of a genetic disability related, just because of the genetic or disability related information that the employee will have to provide. Now, the EEOC did not give specific examples of what might constitute substantial or very large incentives that would be deemed coercive. So I'm thinking that it's a cash payment of like $1,000, something like that. Similar to existing and proposed EEOC guidelines on incentives in other contexts, this guidance does not create a bright line rule on what size incentives would be coercive. Oftentimes, and this year we've had clients give out gift cards or other items of nominal cash value that will likely be deemed acceptable incentives. Other states, not necessarily in California, you might be able to do some sort of lottery for a substantial prize in order to incentivize a larger population. That could also be deemed non-coercive, but generally in California, you stay away from things like that. So basically, with any incentive or reward, you just want to have it not be deemed so extravagant that it's coercive. And then as you are considering whether to implement or recommend a recommended or mandatory vaccine program in your business, you want to just consider a few things, right? Like first, it's just recently that Pfizer got their FDA status and the other two are still pending. And a lot of employees were hesitant to even take the vaccine that they deemed to be experimental. However, I do suspect that position will continue to shift given, the final approval that Pfizer got and then the impending final approval of Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. And then really, regardless of whether you decide to implement a voluntary program or a mandatory vaccine policy, it's important to focus on fact-based messaging, right? I mean, if somebody hasn't gotten vaccinated at this point in the year within your company, there's obviously some sort of hesitation on that employee's part. So just focusing on the facts can be helpful to counteract any hesitation or maybe misinformation that the employee may have received. And then if you can just consider any obstacles in advance, earlier on people had logistical challenges with making the vaccine available to your workforce. You can start thinking about that now if that's something you want to implement, by the end of the year or, sometime next year. It can take some time to organize and get into place. And so with that, I mean, that's kind of what I have to say with incentives and employee relations and just high level, touching on the most current updates. I know Geoff and I wanted to keep this pretty short for you guys. I can talk for hours. Somebody just wrote in the chat, news just came out today that Google is requiring all employees to be vaccinated, no testing options. That is interesting. We've also had clients have employees come to the place of work and basically give a flyer from their church saying that my church does not agree with the vaccine and therefore it's prohibiting all of our members from getting the vaccine. And then you have to deal with the religious accommodation or the religious aspect of it and see if there's an accommodation. So it's interesting to see how it will play out. I think in that specific instance, they are looking for someone to legally challenge. And then it just becomes up to you whether or not you want to be one of the cases that makes it all the way to the California Supreme Court or even US Supreme Court. We all know how costly litigation can be. And, a lot of the clients I have are a little bit on the smaller side and may not be as big as Google to go fight this all the way by putting in a mandate like that. Jeff, any comments there?
No, I agree. I'd like to share that I've got some clients who have had outbreaks at their facilities, and it's really difficult. I'm on a company that doesn't have a large workforce and the ability to keep positions open or keep things moving through the chain. Having 20% of your workforce out, or even more, depending on the outbreak and the impact, is huge. So I think that the preventive stuff that we can do is really important and goes a long way in continuing the ability of a company to work in these hard times already that we're in.
Yeah. Oh, and then one more note on the Google. I don't know if everyone can see the chat or just Jeff and I, but the person who brought up Google says Google is allowing people to apply for exemptions, which makes sense. That way, it's not a hardline rule, and they're not automatically terminating people who might have a sincerely held religious belief or a disability. But yeah, it's an interesting. People keep saying this pandemic is unprecedented, and it really is. We're going to see a lot of legal challenges. And I mean, really just this year in 2021, with the layoffs that happened last year, we still have clients who are being sued from employees who were laid off in March of 2020 in a mass layoff. That's typically plaintiff side employment attorneys don't necessarily take on those types of cases, but we're still getting them in the door.
So are there any additional questions, or anyone want to put something in the chat they'd like addressed by Cindy or myself?
So one question, Jeff, I see is, what do you see companies doing around charging more for health insurance for those who refuse vaccination? And my understanding, and I'd probably need to get up to date. I don't know how current this is, so I don't want to comment necessarily, but my understanding was that if an employee is refusing to get vaccinated, you can put the burden of the cost on getting weekly tested on them. That's the last I heard. Jeff, do you have anything to add there?
I did hear that also, Cindy, that you can have the employee have to pay for the testing. I also read something yesterday where an employer is charging their employees who have not been vaccinated a $50 per month surcharge in addition to the regular health insurance contribution that they make.
You know, I would just be a little bit nervous or hesitant on that, because if it is an employee with a sincerely held religious belief or disability, you know, take that into account. If it's like, we have had clients actually say, well, my husband's religion doesn't want my husband to get vaccinated. And it's like, well, that's not your sincerely held religious belief necessarily. So, you know, think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The information that we're giving you is just general in nature and educational for you guys. It's not legal advice by any means. So if you have circumstances like that, I suggest that you do reach out to an attorney who's educated in that space, such as Cindy.
Yeah, this has changed so much. I think I did like, I don't know, 20 or 30 speeches in 2019 maybe. I did a lot last year too. And then with this, and employment law is always changing, you know, I think Jeff and I have done a number of webinars together over the last several years as well. And it's just important to stay as up to date as you can on this stuff, because you don't want to get caught doing something that you can later be fined for or get sued over.
Yeah. And someone put up here in the chat also that Delta is charging $200 a month more. And I'm assuming that's for health insurance for the employees that haven't been vaccinated. And Cindy, I believe I agree with your point that you just be careful.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is case by case. You know, I mean, we can read out the what's come down with EEOC and the federal government and everything else, but a lot of it can get very factually detailed with the specific employee that you're having to deal with. So it's always important to run any termination decisions by your employment lawyer prior to terminating, hopefully, and then any insurance company questions through Geoff, because he's the most up to date on workers' comp. Our firm does not handle workers' comp at all, so I turn to Geoff for those questions.
So give you a couple of seconds for any more questions.
Yeah, this was really fun, Geoff. You know, if there's any straggler questions, we can, here, I can type in my email address in the chat, and you can always reach out via email, Geoff, if you want to do the same thing too. You know, you can always reach out. If it's a quick question, we're always happy to answer it and, you know, help you as much as we can, but this stuff is changing so often. So yeah, just a quick 30-minute presentation, and I hope everybody stays safe this holiday season, and I'll put my office number in the chat as well. And on some exciting news, just personally, that I'd like to share with everyone, I'm having a baby pretty soon. I'm 9 months pregnant, so it will be by the end of the year for 2021 to get that tax write-off. Thank you, I appreciate that.
To that, Cindy, good luck. Best to you and Anthony and your baby boy coming along. And thank you, everyone. I do plan on doing these on a kind of every other month type basis on topics such as this. And Cindy, it's great to see you. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
happy holidays, guys. Take care. Bye. Thank you, everyone.